I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Planning Committee, and as it's the first meeting of 2025, I wish you all a happy new year, and I hope it's a peaceful new year too. This planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet and will be available to view online now and in the future. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Those attending in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Committee members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending meetings remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? Thank you. Move on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. Rachel, do we have any apologies?
None today, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Niall, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Of course, thank you, Chair. Let me just get that up.
Thank you.
If we can start with Councillor Ashley, please.
I made the legal officer aware of the declarations of interest that I got, but I'll be very brief about what I have. It's the Cwmbran Community Council. I'm a member of the Canal Strategy Group. I'm a member of the, I can't remember now, a member of the Mononbrec Canal Board. I'm Canal Board, appointed by the council. I'm a member of the a non-active member of Torvine Friends of the Earth, and I'm trying to think what the other one was. Obviously, I'm a member of. I'm the local member for the area concerned, but in none of these things was I actively involved talking about this application. That was the bit that I had a conversation with the legal officer, so I'm allowed to talk. As far as I know, she had discussed that with her yesterday.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ashley. So moving on then to Councillor Evans.
Only some of the social bus development, Upper Cwmbran Ward as well. But I don't think today this is within it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gordon.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Councillor Haller.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Councillor Gaynor James.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Councillor John James.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Janet Jones.
Nothing from me, no.
Councillor Mark Jones.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Yourself, Chair.
Nothing to declare, thank you.
Okay, and finally, Councillor Slade.
I'm a member of the Canal Partnership Board, but nothing prejudicial.
Okay, that's everyone, Chair.
Thank you, Niall. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee from the 18th of December 2024. Members, could you possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as approved. Any members? No, I can't see anyone, so we'll take them as approved. Thank you. We'll go on to item 4. which is planning application 23P0298 RES, and it's for the Southern Canal Bridge crossing at land west of Cwmbran Drive, South Sebastopol. Can I ask Duncan Smith, Principal Consultant, to present the report, please?
Good morning, Planning Committee. I've got a
Good morning.
presentation here to share with you. Okay, we're just getting it in shape. Sorry. Oh, there. Can everybody see my cursor?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, thank you. I'll proceed. This is the site plan for this planning application, which the application is for the building of a bridge to link two parts of the South Sebastopol site, and I'll come in more detail on that at the moment. The site covers the length of canal that potentially will be required for constructing the bridge. It also includes land on this side, on the western side of the canal, which is the Maes Gwyn phase, for which there is no approval at the moment. On the eastern side, the houses where my cursor are haven't been built. They will be built as part of the Wren's Nest development, which has already got planning permission. The houses you see on the western side, where my cursor is at the moment, are in place. That's not part of the South Sebastopol site. It's part of the Five Locks estate, which lies adjacent to it. You can go on to the next slide, please, Richard. This is the framework plan that was approved as part of the original approval in outline for the whole of the South Sebastopol development. And this framework plan formed part of that approval, and it set the principle for the layout of the South Sebastopol site. And essentially, I'm going to focus in at the bottom here, and where my cursor is at the moment, that's where the bridge is proposed. Below that, outside the sort of shaded area rather than the coloured area, is the Five Locks estate, which was in place when this decision was taken and which I referred to on the last slide. And then across away from that on the eastern side, where my cursor is at the moment, this is Wren's Nest 2, which has approval, and the houses are currently being built from east to west to join up here. And if we move on to the next slide, this slide shows the status of the South Sebastopol site at the moment in terms of approvals granted, and all apart from the orange area. It's orange to me, it may not be orange to you, but the area where my cursor is at the moment is the Maes Gwyn phase, which at the moment has no approval on it. We're expecting a reserve matters application in on that site quite shortly. Going across to the dark blue area, that is the Wren's Nest development, which, as I mentioned, has a permission and houses are being built there. And you'll see the bridge, or the proposed location of the bridge here. We move on to the next slide. Overall then, there are key considerations, my report covers these, that have to be taken into account in terms of determining the application. First of all, the principle of development. Now, I've already covered that on the slides that I've just been through, in that the principle was set at outline stage, and the framework plan I showed you showed the location of the bridge. and that was approved, the principle at least, that was approved at that stage. And then again, in terms of principle, the Wren's Nest development has been approved, and the access to the bridge from that development has been approved by Planning Committee. So overall, the principle of development, of developing a bridge, and the principle of where that goes has largely been set by permissions that have already been granted. I'm going to move on to the design now. And this is a picture of the bridge, if you're looking from the north, basically. And just for information, where my cursor is at the moment, that's where the towpath is. And the towpath only exists on the east side. And that's quite important to bear in mind as I move through my presentation. In terms of the bridge itself, you'll see it looks very much like a canal bridge. The original approval, the outline approval, set down certain principles for what that bridge should look like, essentially. And those principles have largely been followed in terms of the design. There are issues in terms of the principle set and what you see in front of you here, and they're covered quite extensively in my report in terms of their acceptability or not. I'll come in a moment to the advice that we've had in terms of this and explain in terms of those principles what that advice is. If I move on to the next slide, Richard. Again, just to show the scale, etc. of the bridge, this is a visual from above, just to show you roughly what it would look like. Importantly, the application site is located in the Monmouthshire and Bretton Canal Conservation Area. And you'll see from my report, and I've repeated it here, PPW12 requires that there is a presumption in favour of development that enhances a conservation area and leaves it unharmed at any planning and any planning decision must take account of the impact on the historic environment. So it's crucial that we look at those points and make sure that we're happy with those before we move on. I'll go back to the principle here. The location was set by the outline approval, and at outline approval, when it was approved at outline, it's the location of that bridge in a conservation area, because the conservation area existed back in 2015 when the decision was taken into account. And at that stage, it was approved. So we were happy with the location. As I said above, the design of the bridge is slightly different from that, or differs slightly in terms of the principles it's followed, in terms of the bridge that we've got in front of us. We sought specialist conservation on this planning application, and it's a background paper that you've been supplied with, you could have looked at. And I'll just read the conclusion of that here. The conclusion reads, I note the principle of the bridge would differ in some design detail to those set out within the Southern Bridge design details. Those were the details that were set out in the outline approval. Whilst the principles of which were expected to be followed, I find the submitted plans have taken precedence from traditional bridges along the canal and that are noted within the conservation area's character appraisal to make a positive contribution to the character and appearance. The proposed design of the bridge would therefore better reflect established character and appearance. So overall, that advice is telling us the bridge is acceptable in terms of its design. In terms of the listed buildings, there are 3 listed buildings in close proximity to the bridge, and they're the tunnel, which is 100 metres away but not visible from the bridge, and there are two milestones, 220 metres from there, one going north, one going south. And in terms of those, they're largely unaffected by the location of the bridge. So we'll move on to the next slide. The next key issue to take into account is the construction and associated works. This is a big engineering operation, basically, and it will cause disruption. There's no question about that. In recognition of that, we asked the developer to put in a construction environmental management plan, CEMP I'm going to call it from now on, with the application. And that describes that construction process, and it describes the mitigations that will be put into effect. I'll come to them in a moment in terms of residential amenity, but this is overall mitigations in terms of ecology and the range of things that may be affected. And the NRW and the Canals Trust have expressed concerns that the current CEMP that's with the planning application doesn't provide the details required to fully understand the construction process and mitigation necessary. And they're reflected by the community group, the Bridge 46 group, who've made the same statement. You know, we need to know more about the construction, how will it affect, how will you dewater the canal. We're proposing, or in the report, is a condition requiring the submission of a revised CEMP, and that to be approved prior to commencement of development. So there would be consultation with NRW, the Canals Trust, the Bridge 46 group, to ensure that that was fully up to speed and the mitigations were appropriate. The NRW are content with the approach that we're taking here. If we move on to the next slide. In terms of ecology, the proposal requires the removal of 4 mature trees and 4 groups of shrubs saplings. Also, there's evidence of bats and otters on the site, although there's no evidence of bats roosting in any of the trees on the site. In mitigation of that, woodland is proposed, and I'm going to come to this in a moment and show you it, to the north and south of the proposed bridge, and conditions are proposed requiring the submission of a lighting plan to ensure that bats and otters are protected. So if we move on to the next slide, and I'm moving now on to residential amenity. And before I do that, I'm just going to go back to that master plan and check out where the bridge is going to go, or was proposed. And as you'll see, it is cheek by jowl, really, with the top of the 5 Locks estate. And my cursor is there. You can see that there. If we move on to the next slide, Richard. This is it. This is the proposal in magnified form, and as you'll see, and I'll say beforehand, the application site only covers the area that's enclosed within the pink line, and as I've stated before, this side of the eastern side has planning permission. The road up to this point has planning permission, and these houses are not built, so are unaffected really by the development. The effect really is at the northern tip of the 5 Locks estate, and in particular this property here, which is adjacent. Now it's 20 metres from where the stub road will go, and that's been elevated by 1.5 metres. It's 26 metres from the main construction area. So measures to protect that amenity, both in the short and the longer term, are needed. In terms of the short term, I go back to the Kemp. The Kemp that was submitted recognised the location of this property in relation to the bridge, and it recognised it, but really didn't give the full mitigation that we would want, and we would want that before development started. And you'll see in that condition requiring a revised SEMP that full information is provided in terms of the mitigation to that property there. In the longer term, obviously there's going to be a road at the back of that property, and there is a need for protective measures. And if we go back a slide, Richard, on the framework plan, the area that my cursor is currently going around forms a barrier or a buffer to the development in the Maesgwyn. This is the Maesgwyn development, and essentially this is specifically identified for special treatment in terms of that buffer. So we move back to the slide we were on. Heavy woodland planting is proposed in this area there, and we believe, and a condition covers this, that planting should go in as quickly as possible and include heavy standards. So you've got trees that are are not just saplings put into that area. So I'm now moving on to the next slide, and this is the footpath diversion. As I indicated at the outset of my presentation, the canal towpath exists on the eastern side. There is no towpath on the western side, and there will be a need during the development. As you can imagine, if you're building a bridge there, you can't have people walking through there. So there's going to be a need during the development for closure of that footpath at some point or other. And we asked the developers to produce a document showing to us that there were options for that diversion. That forms part of the planning application. And essentially, you can break it down into three broad option areas. I'm on the option area on the western side, and that would be using the canal tunnel, which is here. You can walk over the top of that, so people come to the canal tunnel, can walk over to the western side, and then potentially routes through the Maesgwyn development, or Maesgwyn phase, joining up with a footpath where my cursor is at the moment, into the 5 lots estate, and then through the 5 lots estate and rejoining the canal where my cursor is at the moment. So that's one option area. The second option area is basically to go east and into the Wren's Nest part of the development, taking the dark blue footpath across the top here. Now, Wren's Nest 1, this area, is completed. All the houses are there, the roads are there, and what have you. And then taking the footpath through that estate, and there are options, obviously, within that, to take a route down into the estate, and then using where my cursor is at the moment is the bus access into the development. Bus, pedestrians, and what have you, who wouldn't be used for cars. And then coming out onto Lowlands Crescent, and then going all the way. Whoops, what have I done? Sorry, Richard. then from Lowlands Crescent back up and rejoin the towpath. And then if we move on to the final options, we asked the developers to consider whether a bridge could be put across. And we looked at two ways of doing that. One coming where my cursor is at the moment, going through the western side, and then coming across here. You can see that's very tight. It's right next to the construction area. And then the other option was to go east and then skirt the western side of the Wren's Nest development. And then this area is a ravine area here, and bringing bridges across potentially to come back to the towpath and meet it below the construction area. So they were the options that were put forward. At this stage, the contract for developing the bridge has not been let. They obviously wait until they get a planning permission before they do that. And we won't know the exact construction, how long the closures will be, what can be to mitigate those closures, what can be done to make this. It's very difficult to get a convenient route, essentially. It's extremely difficult to do that. So we're suggesting that there is a condition put on that this matter is resolved prior to commencement of development. So we'll come back as a condition to be discharged by the developers prior to development. Now, I've missed one big thing in presenting here, and if I go back in the slides, Richard, right to the front. Come down to that one. I didn't cover the reason for the bridge, which is pretty important, and it's part of the principle of the development. Currently, as, in terms of accessing the western side of the South Sebastopol development, there is the Bevans, what we call the Bevans Lane Bridge, which is here. This development is proposing a second access, which would allow a ring of roads around the development, which is considered essential that development of this size should be able to have that ring. Also, in terms of emergency, etc., having two accesses across the bridge is important as a feature of development. But most importantly, because hopefully that would never be required, is the sustainability and the ability of people to move around conveniently to different parts of the site. So that's the reason two bridges were required on this development. I think that completes my presentation, Chair, only to say my recommendation is approval in this instance, subject to the conditions which I've covered in my little talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. I can't see any hands up yet for questions. Councillor Stephen Evans, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question, looking at the consultation from others, there seems to be a lot of issues regarding, you know, the protection of the biodiversity, the water content, the aquatic life. I mean, there seems to be a lot of proposals, you know, to try and mitigate, but I don't think we're doing enough, personally. The other concern I have got is on a previous issue with the bridge, the bung to shut the water off in the canal was left in longer than it should have been, and there was a lot of confrontation between us and them to get it removed. And I hope we don't lead with the second bridge along the same issues, because people weren't happy that it was taking longer than necessary to complete the task that they promised. So could somebody answer that?
Could you answer that, please, Duncan?
In terms of biodiversity, I covered that in my presentation. And I think, you know, any development of this nature is going to impact. I think the impacts, though, are limited to a small area of the canal. Largely, it will remain in place. The green corridor provided by the canal will remain in place. And also the measures that I mentioned, the planting, which will exceed quite significantly the number of trees that are there at the moment, and the protective measures for the European species, the bats and the otters, is in place. So I think overall this will add to the biodiversity on the site. In terms of the engineering operation, and I'll say now, I know there's a lot of concerns about what happened when the first bridge was improved and put into place. And I mentioned in my talk that we're unhappy with the camp that's been submitted, and it needs to be detailed up far more. And as I say, the NRW were happy to cover that as a condition. That's something to be sorted out before development takes place. So there will be disruption, but if a revised camp comes in, we will know what that operation, what the process is, and we should be able to mitigate as largely if we can. But bear in mind, and you know, I won't shy away from this, potentially this could be a year to a year and a half to develop, and there will be closures of the canal during that period, and there will be periods when the canal is dewatered. The whole effort behind the camp is to ensure that is minimised.
Can I come back in, Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Can I ask, you know, are we going to be regularly checking at certain stages of this development? Because I think the last time there was failings because there was no checking what was happening.
We were asked by the two Pont Newydd members, not Councillor Ashley, by the way, although you probably would agree with what was asked, that a liaison committee be formed, so that there's a regular input to the local community about what's going on. The developers have proposed a liaison officer, a named liaison officer with contact details. We think perhaps a little bit more is required than that. So again, in terms of the camp, we've asked that they beef up the local liaison in the camp before approval, and that to be approved before they commence development. So liaison should take place, and I understand that we own the land on which the bridge is being built. And I understand that talks are going on between our estates people and Taylor Wimpey in terms of the development and how that's controlled by that land ownership interest. So we're coming at it from two angles, basically.
Right, Councillor Evans, are you satisfied? Thank you. We've got a question now from Councillor Stuart Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Duncan. You've obviously put a lot of work into this, which I very well know. As I said, I've not taken part in the discussions on this very deliberately, so I could make a comment here. Importantly, Steve alluded to the major problem we had with it last time, which was Bridge 46. That was a long time, and I think hopefully the developers and ourselves learned a lot of lessons from that one, which you appear to have done with this application. There is no question that this bridge has to go forward. We've done a site visit on here. The chair well remembers the site visit. We know that. What we need to be clear about, and you've answered some of it, is the phasing of the development and liaison, which you've answered. But what I'm concerned about, and I'm pretty certain my colleagues are as well, is how the whole development goes forward, timescales, and care about environment and the footpath, which is the thing that's going to cause more angst, I think, than anything. I have certain views about where it should go and why it should go. It's a very. Could you tell us how busy that footpath is, and which options? Well, I mean, options about mitigating that in terms of annoying residents, in terms of going through various estates, where we go with it, because the views I have on it obviously are down to least disturbance of the footpath, because it's an extremely busy area, that canal path. It's a road in effect with pedestrians and cyclists along it. I'm not making a statement on this, by the way. It's a matter of observation that it's very busy. And obviously, as has happened last time, any diversion is going to cause problems for everybody, and that's already been observed in this application. So what are we going to do to make sure that happens? The liaison group sounds an excellent idea. And where are your thoughts on getting that one done? The other point being, you say a year. I hope that's the truth, because I hope that's the effect, because end of the day, my memory goes back to what happened with Bridge 46, and that was considerably longer. I would also ask some more detailed questions about things like, and it's mentioned in the application, things like fish and navigation, etc., because this is quite important to the community down here in terms of being able to get boats down to 5 locks, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. I'd be just interested to hear what your observations are on that, Duncan. Thank you.
Can you answer that, Duncan, please?
Yeah. Revised camp should give phasing and timescales for different phases of development. So the camp should cover that. It doesn't at the moment. It should cover that. So you've got an idea of how long things are going to take, and then within that there should be the implications during those phases of what engineering-wise is going on, particularly in terms of the canal and the presence of water or not. So the camp is a very important document and should provide a route map for how the development looks and goes, but also give you timescales. In terms of the footpath diversion, it's a knotty one. You only have to look at the plan and see where people could potentially go. It's difficult. You ask me how well used it is. I use it myself. It's very well used. It's an important route in the borough. There's no question. The towpath throughout the borough is probably one of the most important pedestrian routes that we have. To build the bridge, you have to close the footpath. There is no answer to that question. You've got to close it both for pedestrians and for navigation. Going back to the camp, that should tell us when and how long. In terms of the diversion itself, as you'll see from even the bridge options are inconvenient. So it's quite a choice to make, but unfortunately it's a necessary choice. I can't really say more than that.
Can I come back, Chair, if I may?
Yes, if you're quick.
Yeah, I will be quick. I think the whole. What's what I'm going to say? I understand your dilemma on this, but I think we have to be so careful about this, because what happened last time brought about a 4,000 person action group, and residents not happy. So it's about how we go with that, because as members we're sensitive to that, and I think this planning committee is. Am I getting that we will have meetings that it will come back to us as a planning committee? That's the one aspect to this. We obviously got you're putting a liaison group. How do the developers actually get this? Because we got the conditions. And I've been on this planning committee long enough to know that some of this is got and some of this isn't got. I just wonder, because our actual sanctions, if things go wrong, are pretty limited. But from their point of view, this has to go well, because we don't want a repeat of what happened before. Can you say anything about this, Duncan? Because it is, if it goes well and it's not long, then it'll be good. If it's not, we're back to where we were with Bridge 46. So that I really worry about this.
Duncan, can you say anything about this?
I can say clear and loud the developers are fully aware of the what happened on Bridge 46, and are fully aware and alert to the fact that they don't want it to happen here. We've got an ESG that meets, and this has been discussed at those ESGs. The developers are, I think, more than aware, if you like, of the issue. In terms of the discharge of that condition, that would come back to planning committee.
Thank you. That's the bit I wanted to know.
Right, thank you. Niall, is there anyone in the chamber? I believe somebody's got their hand up for a question.
Yeah, that's Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Duncan, for your presentation. Two quick questions. Partly the one was asked by Councillor Ashley. My concern is access for people with mobility issues, wheelchairs, scooters. How are they going to be cared for when the tow path is being closed? And secondly, you said about the trees coming down. We have to be aware that nesting with trees from February to August, so that's another concern as well. And that's all my two questions.
Thank you, Janet. Can you answer those, please, Duncan?
Chair. You'll note that among the consultees was the Torfaen, I've forgotten their name for the life of me. Torfaen, it's been mouthed to me by Councillor Morgan, but I still can't remember. TFA. They're part of this. I did arrange at one point to walk it with one of their members, but they couldn't do it. Really, it's going to be difficult. And, making provision is going to be difficult, but we'll certainly make sure that the Disabled Forum is part of any decision that's taken. That's the first thing. And then secondly, in terms of nesting, the Kemp will cover that to ensure that they don't take trees down during the nesting season. As I said, there's no bats that we've seen in there that have come through surveys living there, but that check will be made again before this goes ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Slade, want to ask you a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let's be honest here. This authority has got a pretty sketchy record when it comes to enforcing planning conditions, and so much of the detail with this planning application is going to be conditioned. So what sort of reassurance can you provide members that the pre-commencement conditions, such as a camp, will be enforced?
Right. Would you like to answer that, Duncan?
Do you want to come in here? Yeah.
I'll take that one, Councillor Slade. As you know, some time ago, we did appoint an extra officer in our enforcement group, particularly to monitor some of these bigger schemes. I think because we're aware of the issues around this one. We've been particular in the conditions being put down on there, so I would suspect that with this extra resource that we've got, we would keep a very close eye on this development, and I think the liaison group will help with that as well. So yeah, not meaning to speak for Hugh, but I think this one will need to be closely watched. I fully agree that we need to make sure that any enforcement is taken in a timely way, but that we make sure that all the trigger points are properly met. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I mean, I was unaware of the extra resource that's been put in. Thank you for that.
Right, thank you. Councillor Ashley, you want to come in again?
Does that mean that on this liaison group that we will have NRW and our environmentalists to help with that process? Because I kind of remember in the past that having that kind of reinforcement in this process, monitoring scrutiny of this process, because we've had it in the past with things like the fireflies and things. The problem is fish, and the problem is things like that. And I well respect what Duncan's done. Is the devil is in the detail. Following from Alan's questions here, we need to be on that one all the time.
Duncan, can you answer that, or Richard?
Well, I think Richard has answered that. And the devil is in the detail here. I do agree with that. And I think we're seeing a commitment here to enforcement being a priority in terms of this one. We've also got land ownership as well, remember, that we should use in whatever means are available to ensure that things are done right.
I also wonder what we can do to help residents and others in terms of reassurance, because that is also part of this process.
I think the fact that there would be a strong liaison with that local community really answers that. It's a question of getting a dialogue between the developer and the community, a healthy dialogue, if I can call it that, to ensure that, there are going to be periods where there is inconvenience. I think people want to know when that's going to be and how long it's going to be. And just things like that are going to be important to get relayed out to people, I believe. Because there will be inconvenience here.
We will be doing it as well if we have a liaison committee. That's the question I'm asking, because obviously we're the landlords, we're the landowner, as we said there as well.
Yeah.
Right, you satisfied now, Stuart?
Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you. I can't see any other hands up. Right. Is there anyone, a member? I'd like to ask a member to move a proposal.
Yes, I'll move it, Chair, with all the conditions for approval.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? I can see a seconder.
I will second it, yeah.
Yeah. We have 2 seconders. So, Niall, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they are for, against, or are abstaining?
Yes, of course, Chair. So, Councillor Ashley?
For, strongly with all the conditions. Don't say that normally.
Okay. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, approve with conditions.
Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, for.
Councillor Haller?
For.
Councillor Gaynor-James?
For.
Councillor John James?
For.
Councillor Janet Jones?
For with conditions.
Councillor Mark Jones?
For.
Yourself, Chair?
For.
And Councillor Slade?
For.
Right, that looks as if it's... what are you going to say?
That was unanimous, Chair, sorry.
Yes, I was just going to say, looking at my ticks going off there. Yes, it's unanimous. So this application has been approved. And I'd like to thank you, everyone, for your attendance and your contributions today. And I'll close the meeting.